All right, good morning. It is 10:30, so we will go ahead and get started. I would like to thank everyone for registering and joining us. I anticipate there'll be a few folks trickling in just after now. So my name is Ashley Alquist. I'm the emergency manager for Yavapai County. This is our first ever webinar that we have hosted. We try our best to get out to the communities and talk about preparedness. So of course, if there's any community meetings or church groups, HOA groups, et cetera, that you'd love to have us speak at, please let us know and we'd be more than happy to come out. But we wanted to leverage technology and try this route. So please let us know if you find this to be valuable, if you would think it'd be beneficial for us to continue, maybe do a series on how to build a go bag and the likes. But there'll be a survey at the end. We will have polls throughout this session so we can get some engagement and check your preparedness levels. We do have some staff from emergency management on. We have John Jones, our deputy, and Katie Green, our specialist. So I will ask for them to kind of monitor the chat and the Q&A as we go through this. So if you have any questions, they'll be touching base on that, or we'll hopefully have enough time at the end for folks to come off of mute and go through that. So here in emergency management, we're a small but mighty team. There's only 4 of us to kind of oversee the emergency management operations for Yavapai County. And emergency management is really about helping the community build its resilience and its ability to prepare, to respond, to recover, to mitigate against any sort of hazard, whether it be man-made or natural. And so we're going to go through some of those preparedness items right now. So I want you to start off with forgetting the Rambo approach. To be quite blunt, if you are someone who is well prepared with the months of stuff on end, you are able to survive in different situations. I'm not worried about you. It's for the folks that seem to view preparedness as to be overwhelming and daunting. And to be fair, I was one of those people when I first came into the office 5 years ago. I came in as a specialist, and when I started realizing that I was going to have to walk the talk, it was very intimidating because I looked at the price tag of getting all these things, getting a go bag, these various kits, and I was worried. I was very, very overwhelmed. And so I understood how easy it was to be like, nope, I'm not thinking about this right now. But actually, when I started to assess where I was and the supplies that I had, I was actually not that far off. So I'm someone who, when I get stressed or I just want some downtime, me time, I'll go drive a random Forest Service road or get out there and go camping. And as a result of that, I had stuff in my car already. I learned from getting stuck and have those supplies in my vehicle, so I was prepared. I'm also the daughter of a nurse, so I have a first aid kit not only at work, but in my car and a couple at home. And so when I started assessing those things, I realized I was not as far off as I thought I was. And when it comes down to preparedness, the whole idea is to limit the interruption these events have in our life, and small steps help us accomplish that. So something is better than nothing. We don't have to be some survivalist. We can still be prepared for the everyday stuff in smaller steps. So fun fact, 91% of Americans live in an area with a hazard. Now, this statistic was pulled from an article written by Amanda Ripley back in like 2005, 2006. It was in the heels of Hurricane Katrina, and she had the question of how do we know what is going to, say, a community is going to survive after an incident or a disaster. She also writes the book, The Unthinkable. I highly recommend it. But in that pursuit of figuring out how do we know, she was speaking with the emergency manager in King County, Washington, which is a Seattle area. And they broke it down to these 4 reasons as to why people don't prepare. Because even though it could be a hurricane, it could be a tsunami, a volcano, floods, earthquakes, wildfires, people just don't prepare. And the 4 mentality is that people think that it won't happen to them. If it does, it's not going to be that bad. It's not going to impact them. Or if it's really that bad, there's nothing they can do to prepare. That is false. So some of the hazards that we have here in Yavapai County, Our wildfire, I think that's the one that gets the most attention. We see the smoke, and we have a very real history with some tragedy involving wildfire in our county. But it's not the only thing that we are prone to. Flash flooding is actually one of the leading causes of weather fatalities. We have our severe weather, so our thunderstorms, our high winds, lightning, extreme heat. And when we think about Yavapai County, it's important to realize that it's 8,127 square miles. And so it's not just the Prescott Basin or the Verde Valley. We also have the areas down in Congress and Black Canyon City, areas that really do experience some of those extreme temperatures. The Verde Valley does get hot as well. We have the I-40 corridor. And so those summer temperatures can be something that is of a detriment here. We also have potential for hazardous material incidents, especially with some of our transportation corridors. We can see power outages. And if you weren't aware already, about 3 years ago, APS came out with a tool called the power shutoffs, public safety power shutoffs. There we go. Sorry. And it's where they may turn off the power in events of where there's just a high possibility of fire risk due to the red flag warning and what have you. And not only for planned events, but there could be outages that happen for any number of reasons. Just the other week, Seligman experienced a several day outage after a semi truck crashed into power lines up there on that 40. And so while the work was being done, they were without power for a number of days. And while we have not had a good winter in a while, we do, in theory, do get winter storms that can impact us up here. So, with that being said, I am curious which hazards you guys think are the most dangerous. Hopefully, a little poll popped up. Did everyone get the poll on their screen? Okay. I'll let that continue. Okay. So, why should we be prepared? Well, first responders may be overwhelmed. Depending on the size and scope of an incident, there's not enough first responders, and so we may have to be our own first responder, depending on what's going on. Um, Roads could be blocked, the system could be overwhelmed. Um, it's important to recognize that we have skills, or we should be establishing ourselves with the skill set to be able to be slightly self-sufficient, neighbors helping neighbors, and that such. Um, Power and communications can fail, and so there may be that environment where, again, you are your own first responder. But in addition to that, being prepared honestly helps with our anxiety and our fear surrounding preparedness. Our office hosts the Yavapai Firewise meeting every month. I'd strongly recommend folks to check it out. But we had a meeting a couple of years ago. A gentleman had spoken about a wildfire, and it was about December. A wildfire had kicked off south of Prescott, and he was noticing that a lot of his neighbors were pretty freaked out. They didn't know what they were going to do. They were very uneasy, knowing that there was a plume of smoke, and it turned out to be fine. Forest Service got on it, and they're able to put it out. But then he contrasted that to his life, and they looked at it and said, "Okay, that's not good." But we have a plan, we have our go bags, like, we're ready to go. Um, if we have to evacuate, so be it. We're prepared. And that's something that can be said across multiple things. If you don't like public speaking, and the more you do it, the more you become comfortable with it. And so the same goes for preparedness. And of course, the more that each one of us are prepared, the more our community overall is prepared. So how can we do that? There's actually 4 steps, but we'll start with 3 of making a plan, building a kit, and staying informed. So planning. These are the types of questions that you should be asking yourself, and it's not all inclusive. There's plenty of other questions you should ask, but these are the types of things you should be thinking of on whether or not you need to add something to your plan. So, how will you receive emergency alert in the mornings? How will you know if there's an emergency? Do you know what you're going to do if you have to evacuate? What's your shelter plan? What's your evacuation route? Do you know multiple ways to get out of your neighborhood? How are you going to communicate if there's no cell service? Do you have a meeting spot? Do you have a method to communicate someone out of the area? When was the last time you updated your preparedness kit? I was guilty of this. I had my vehicle kit, finally brought it in to be updated, and found snacks that were very, very expired, including sardines, and they needed to be refreshed. You don't want to be in an emergency situation where you need something and it's not ready to go. What about savings? Do you have money set aside for emergencies? Do you have adequate insurance coverage? So, when looking at planning, some of the things that you can look at is picking an out of area contact. So, someone that can be kind of like your check-in person. So maybe it's a family member, someone that can just be that point of contact. So if there is a communication failure, whenever you do have the opportunity, check in with the family member, and they're able to check base with everyone here locally, as they're able to check in. Everyone knows to contact them. We also recommend having two meeting spots, one that's close to your home. So this is something where maybe there's a structure fire or there's a gas leak, something where you need to evacuate your home, but someplace close that you guys can rally. And additionally, something if you do have to evacuate, especially if you're at the store or you're at work, kids are at school, where's a location that if you can't go home, where will you go? And be able to meet up and make sure that everyone knows where this is. You've actually gone there, you've practiced it, so that way you know if Google Maps is going to be a little tricky or not. Just make sure everyone knows how to get there. It's really important to keep in mind with emergency plans that these plans need to be specific to your needs. I can give you templates. There are templates available through ready.gov. There's stuff on our website, American Red Cross, but my plan is going to be different than, like, say, John or Katie, because we all have different household needs. Take into consideration your medications, your medical equipment. Do you have pets? Someone with no pets is obviously not going to have to plan for someone who maybe has like 5 horses and a bunch of chickens and goats, or even just a goldfish and a cat. Those are things that you need to take into consideration when you are planning. Um, what are mobility concerns that maybe you have? Is it going to take you a long time to evacuate? Maybe that's when you look at leaving during set rather than go. If you do have to load up a bunch of animals or you have mobility concerns, um, make sure you're planning for that accordingly. Have a plan that you write it down. People know what it is. Make sure you update it too. Things change, and practice it. That's the biggest thing. So you can write the plans. You can say it sounds good. Yeah, my neighbor, so and so is going to grab my dog, put him in the crate, and then meet me wherever. If you've never done that, and it's a high stress environment, is the dog really going to get into the crate? Are they going to go with your neighbor? Make sure you actually practice it and you know where the gaps are so you can make those changes appropriately. It's better to do it during a practiced environment than during an actual emergency. Emergency kits. So I am curious, as we started going through this, I have another poll popping up. How prepared do folks feel? If you had to deal with an emergency right now, how prepared do you feel? Okay. So 67% right now saying somewhat prepared. You've thought about it. That's good. Baby steps. Okay. Well, feel free to continue answering that question. So when we think about emergency kits, we're going to break it down into two different ways. It's if you have to stay at home and if you have to go. So right now on the screen is a list of recommendations of things that you can include in your stay-at-home kit. It does say 72 hours, and that I would say is a good baseline, and that should be a minimum goal that we aspire to. But we are starting to encourage that to be extended to 2 weeks. Now, try not to let that get too overwhelming. There was a point in time when my fiance and I lived in a one bedroom, one bathroom apartment, and there was not a chance that I was going to have a gallon for each of us per person for 2 weeks. This wasn't going to happen, but that doesn't mean that there's not other methods to have water purification. We pivoted for what our environment was. And I know when I go home to visit my mom in her house, she has a bunch of stuff in her garage. That's great, but not everyone can do that. So take bite-sized pieces. And this, again, is just a guideline. Your kit should also be appropriate to your needs and should be coordinated and closely with your plans. So if you have medical needs, make sure you have supplies for that. If you have powered medical equipment, how will you power it if there's no electricity? So do you have a backup power source? How are you going to keep your phone charged? If the power goes out and you have livestock and barn animals and you are on well water, what does that look like? Make sure your kit appropriately reflects those needs. You have extra medication, you've got clothes, and not just for the summer, but also for the winter. If you're like me, and sometimes we feel like wearing the cute shoes or the non-practical shoes, I keep a pair of tennis shoes on hand in case I needed to switch it up. Those are the types of things you should be taking into consideration with your kits. Someone who is a daily commuter, their emergency kit may look a little bit differently than someone with a bunch of kids or someone with a bunch of horses and the like. So again, just make sure that those are available for your needs. Actually, I do think I have one more survey on that. So sending a survey, and I'll continue with the presentation, but feel free to share what your current supply situation is. Also, with the emergency kits, try to make sure it's refreshed. As I referenced earlier, I encountered a situation where I was refreshing it and found out I had very expired snacks, things that were no longer good. And so thankfully, I caught that while I was refreshing it rather than in a situation where I needed something and went, oh crap. So try to rotate it. Having like canned goods and such, if you want to have those in your pantry, make sure they are things that you eat. If you don't like sardines now, you're not going to like them during an emergency. If they are foods that you eat regularly, green beans, corn, whatever suits you, you make sure you use them so they stay refreshed. Like just because they're the surplus or the stock of preparedness stuff doesn't mean you don't ever touch it. In fact, you should be, and making sure that things stayed refreshed. You can label everything with your name, at least a date, especially when we're looking at food. If you're looking at a kit or an area that you have multiple people in the house, that naming can be beneficial. Also recommend that you take photos just for the documentation. Have your go bag, which we'll touch on here shortly, somewhere close by, and build in stages. Like start with the day worth of supplies. Are you going to be okay if it powers out for a day? Do you have enough stuff for that? Then start expanding it and building that kit. So when we look at evacuating, this is going to be slightly different because you may not take all the same things that you would to hunker down. You may not need to take a propane tanker or whatever. But we look at evacuations in terms of the 5 Ps. So your people, pets, personal items, prescriptions, papers, and priceless items. These are things that you can quickly grab. In other presentations we've done, community members have shared that they have kind of a tiered system. So if they know they're on a set, they have maybe just a little bit of time, this is what they're grabbing. If they have to go right now, this is what they're grabbing. And so they have that prepared. Personal items, make sure you have stuff, your daily hygiene items, your prescriptions, social security cards, deeds, and all that good stuff. Don't necessarily recommend having your children's baby books or your photo albums always by the front door, but knowing where they are in your house, being able to quickly grab them is vital. If it's something that you feel you need to take, make sure you know where it's at. So you're not digging for it and wasting time. Um, that's that's important here. So let me quickly take a look at the results here. Okay, so it's evenly split of folks between having a go bag and a 2-week kit, or just having a go bag. So I recognize that here in Yavapai County and really in Arizona, we typically think about the go bags because it's wildfires, it's floods that lead us to having to leave home. But we do experience those circumstances, as I mentioned earlier, like with Seligman, they were at home for 3 days and no power. So, what does that look like for you if you're in a similar situation? When it comes to your go bags, it's important to recognize that there's no way for public safety officials to know how long an evacuation is going to last. We've seen previous evacuations where people evacuate and then the next day they're like, well, why can't we go home yet? The danger hasn't passed. And they typically reference, well, I got to go back to work. My kids got to go to school. What about this and that? And when you evacuate, keep in mind that we don't know if you'll be able to go home in a matter of hours or a couple of weeks. So when we talk about preparedness, again, we're looking at how to limit disruptions in our life. So is your go bag sufficient enough for you to be away from home, but maintain going to work, taking care of the kids, as best as possible under these conditions? Okay, so staying informed. Got a new poll for you to see how many have signed up for emergency alerts. Wait a second for that. And hopefully you have. So while that comes in, 100% so far. Excellent. So emergency notifications are one of the best ways for you to stay informed. What's great about the opt-in system is it doesn't matter if you are shopping in Phoenix or you are out of town, you register your address or addresses so you can get those alerts, even if you're home or if you're not at home. You can choose how those come to you. It could be via text message, phone call, or email. And so we highly, highly recommend that. We do have tools in our toolbox that are based on your physical location. So if we have a bunch of tourists, that's is really helpful then. So regardless if they opted in or not, we can send that alert, but it doesn't help if you aren't in the area and it does impact you. So make sure you have signed up for that. We also encourage folks to know your evacuation zone. Evacuation zones, sending that poll right now, is something that we recently implemented in the last couple of years. In my previous life, I was a 911 dispatcher for the sheriff's office, and I've sent a great number of emergency alerts in my life. And what used to have to happen was the deputies would tell me on the radio or via phone call, like, hey, we need to draw an alert or send an alert to this area that is north, south, east, west of these roads or that landmark. And so it takes time for us to be able to draw that polygon to appropriately alert the right people. And so rather than doing that every single incident, we know ahead of time, like what our hazards are, what some of our risks are. So we developed those polygons and those shapes ahead of time. So now it allows first responders to say, hey, we need to evacuate YCU 1208, or we need to put 1286 on set. And then on the flip side, you, as the resident, get the alert and are able to pull up the link to see the area being impacted, where roadblocks are, shelter locations, etc. And great, that looks like most know their zone. So this is an example of what an alert might look like. So this is one we did last year for the Brady fire. We put a general location to where it was being impacted. It was out in Pine Flat. The zones that were being evacuated, gave them instructions, but then gave them a specific link to see that. So that's how those systems work together to get that information to you. Okay. So here in Arizona, we utilize the Ready, Set, Go system. Um, you will never get a ready message because we should always be ready. That's when you are signing up for emergency alerts. That's when you have your go bag. That's when you've created your plan. That's all the things that you should be doing now to be ready. The next step is set. This is where you should prepare to evacuate. There's some danger in the area, and they're giving you that heads up. And of course, go is to evacuate. It's important to realize that you may not always have the luxury of set, or you may have a set and then a matter of minutes later, you're on go. So just recognize that and understand that conditions can change quickly. Through the Smart 911 system, we do have what's called a functional needs registry. You can register for it through Smart 911, but if you have mobility challenges, maybe you might need assistance with evacuating, maybe you can't evacuate your pets. This is a way for us to know that ahead of time. Admittedly, the system does ask a lot of questions because it's tied to something that feeds to dispatch if they purchase it, but only answer what you feel comfortable with. We only really care if you have mobility challenges, you need assistance with evacuating, assistance with your animals evacuating, if you have powered medical equipment. So that way we're able to assess that during our planning stages when we're looking at evacuations. Um, this should not be your primary plan. You should have a plan in place should you need to evacuate, but allows us to help if we're able to. Okay. Last step is to get to know your neighbors. They have done pretty comprehensive studies on asking the question, how do we know if someone is going to survive a disaster? Like, how do we know what communities? And what they found is that it doesn't matter what the socioeconomics are. It doesn't matter if FEMA comes to save the day, which has never been a thing. It's really about the social ties that exist in a community. So those that, you know your neighbors, you have those strong social ties, maybe you volunteer. And that's one of the great things about Yavapai County is we have a very robust volunteer network. And so that is what really allows folks to be able to recover is to have those ties. So we strongly encourage folks to get to know your neighbor, maybe consider volunteering, and that'll help everyone. All right, the time snuck up on me because I only did 30 minutes, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. We can let you off of mute. Please fill the survey at the QR code so we can know if this was valuable. If it's something we should continue. I will be posting this on YouTube, so if you would like to watch it or share with friends, you have that opportunity. Okay, I don't see any questions. So I will let you guys go back to your day. I greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you found this to be helpful.